I was born and raised in Detroit. I love my city. I adore all the growth and the architecture and all the amazing things we've accomplished, whether it be Motown or the automotive industry. And as I've traveled the world and spent time and lived in different places, I find that there's no place like home. Detroit will always be home to me, and it'll always be a place that I love. I love the staple, which is amazing. And it really inspired me to do my podcast, which is called Detroit Girl Transform. I decided to do this podcast on Resilient Radio, which is a Black-owned station based in Detroit. And it really highlights the transformation of my city while I, as an individual, was transforming. And what kind of people come out of Detroit, which are really people with hustle and grit, who are determined and also exhibit perseverance. The podcast will really focus on different people that have different phases of transformation, whether it be their finances, their well-being, their travel experiences, how they transform their relationships, how they transform their spiritual beliefs. Because at the end of the day, we all want the same thing, and that's what's best for our city, and that's what's best for our legacy and our future and our family. Happy Transformation Tuesday. I am Tony Carter, your favorite Detroit girly and your transformation coach of Detroit Girl Transform. Tonight, I want to welcome you to an amazing journey, which is going to be soul nourishing as we talk about the journey from grief to grace. So many of us have experienced loss, whether it be of our dreams, our identities, of people that we love, moments that we have to reshape into our new future and how we move throughout the world. So this evening we're going to take some time to hold the space for that transformation, because I think when you think about grief, you absolutely have to give yourself grace to even take that journey. So I'm joined by two incredible women who are subject matter experts in their own right. Absolutely amazing certifications, boss chicks. I love them. And that is Laila and Renisha. And we're going to learn a lot about them and who they are. So welcome, Laila and Renisha.
Thank
Greetings,
you.
greetings. Hello,
Yes.
America.
So these are my grief counselors. No, I'm just kidding. But I'm so excited to get into this tonight. I think um, Renisha is going to talk to us from a clinical therapeutic perspective. Laila is going to talk to us from a life coach and journeys perspective, but they also have intersection in many of their expertise. So you'll
Mhm.
see them cross paths on many conversations tonight. And we really want to help people build and hold that space, right? And not feel ashamed, not suffer in silence, because there are a lot of people that have experienced grief in different ways. And so it just reminds me of some of the amazing things that we've done over time. Just even the three of us, I've known Walali my whole life, well,
Yeah.
pretty much
Yeah.
most of our life. So she's quick story. Her mom and my mom were best friends, so we grew up as cousins. So we're not actual blood cousins, but our parents were friends before we can long before we can remember. And Renisha and I met in 1994 at Martin Luther King Jr. Senior High School in Detroit,
Fired
class of
up,
98.
fired up.
Uh,
KC fired up.
KC. So it's always exciting to see people that I've grown up with just leaning and stepping into their purpose. So before I get started with the episode, I just want to share just something personal. I most recently celebrated my birthday. Doesn't matter which one. We don't got to get into numbers, but I celebrated my birthday.
25 times 25 plus one. There you go.
There you go, 25 plus one. So
Mhm.
recently celebrated my birthday, and I had a gathering with my family in Detroit while I was in town. And my sister Tanya just gave me a beautiful blanket, and in the center of it, it was a picture of people on my mom's side of the family that passed away that I love. It was a blanket with
Mm.
my grandmother, my dad, my uncle Dwayne. Oh Lord, I should to put it up now. I might start
Wow.
crying,
That is
but
beautiful.
but it
Wow.
says Tony's Angels.
Oh.
And
Thank you,
it's
Tanya.
Oh,
I know, and it was probably one of the most beautiful gifts that I could have ever
wow.
received because I truly need my angel squad with me. And so I just say that to say this is how you bring life to a situation where you were in so much pain. I mean, in the upper left hand corner, that's my daddy, yo, that's my grandfather, and I just, I think about everyone on here. Most recently, Auntie Bobby passed away. She's our matriarch of the family. And so I just think that, this is just a reminder for those of us that have lost people that we love. There are angels, right? And so I love that my sister gave me that blanket that says Tony's Angels, and it feels like they're surrounding me.
I
And
love
so this
it.
is my first time being able to look at the blanket without crying. She had me crying in the middle of my birthday party. But I just wanted to share how my sister brought light to something that's very heavy for me.
Oh, it's
That's
beautiful.
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 Yeah, yes. So let's get into it, ladies. So before we get started, and I'll start with you, Laila, and then go to you, Renisha. Tell us a
Yes,
little bit
ma'am.
about who you are. Where you what kind of work you do. And I'm also curious, and I always say this about people who are like coaches and therapists. How do you pour back in yourself? Because I mean, y'all not gonna say it on here, but I know y'all get done some days like, woo, child, to listen to everybody's problems. How do you bring peace and joy back into yourself after the heaviness of other people? So I'll start
Yeah,
with you, Laila, and go to you, Renisha.
absolutely, absolutely. So I am Laila Williams. I'm a transformation coach. Um, I really enjoy helping people rebuild their lives after life interrupts us, right?
Mm,
I
Um,
love that.
I started this after going through what I call my own personal tsunami. I was
mm,
married, I got divorced. Let's do it in the right order. So my mom passed
Right.
away. I
Passed
got
away.
divorced. And then my dad passed away.
Yeah, Uncle
And
James passed away. Mhm.
yep. And during that time, I remember telling my best friend, like, so after my mom passed away and my dad was sick, I was going, when my dad passes away, this is gonna break me. And she said, watch your words. And I was like, you know what? She was like, there is so much life and death in the tongue. Watch your words. And I said, you know what? My amazing angels are going to help take me places that I could have never dreamed of going. And
Mhm.
from there, I used to tell people, you need to get you a friend. And that was always our line. When something was happening in life, you need to get you a friend and not just any friend. You needed somebody who could give you perspective, somebody who could hold space for you, somebody who could help you navigate your feelings. And then it just seemed like it was only natural that that was something that I moved into doing. I was like, well, this is part of my purpose. So though I enjoy relationship counseling, and helping people navigate various relationships, grief is something close to my heart. And I call it graceful grieving. Grace isn't
oh,
just about loss, it's also about transformation. And for me, grief is like the ultimate price of love. So, and if that being a big
Mm,
part of relationships, when your world shifts internally, how you show up personally and professionally shifts too. So, and to pour back into myself, I read books. I'm enjoying books. I like stillness and reflection. I like to sit in silence. And really, for me, stand anchored in God, because if not, I wouldn't be grounded at all. There's a lot of prayer that
mhm.
happens over here. So, after you listen to people and I hang up that phone, I exhale and I'm like, come on, Lord, let's do it. So, yeah, that's it. So grief is heavier, but and it's heavier when you carry it alone. So that's really how it got here.
and this is kind of what I call the second leg of your career, right?
hmm Yes, yes.
The
But
life
look, by
coaching.
day, yep. By day I'm an engineer. So yeah, yeah.
Renisha, how about you? Tell us about you and what you do. Renisha's a reoccurring guest. She's a part of our well-being series, so this is her second time on here. So tell us what you do and how you pour into yourself.
Well, greetings, beautiful people. I am Renisha D. Fluker. Um, as a person, I will consider myself a partner. I get to walk through people's lives with them through hardships, through life transitions, and I help them reach their higher selves by tapping into their for real internal compasses, not to live like me, but to live by their own moral code and their standards and their beliefs. I believe your authority is in your authenticity, which means the more and more we live authentic lives, is the more power we will experience in our life.
Yeah.
I am a licensed professional counselor as well as supervisor on my own business, which is called Out of My Counseling Center. And I do a myriad of mental health disorders, and grief became so close to me. Really, I would probably say more young, losing like my second mother in my life to having a big family and losing many people, especially during COVID. So, and I started seeing a lot of clients during that time, and everything, all the sessions was about loss. And therefore, I started a grief series, and then I started getting a lot of trainings and certifications in it because during COVID, it just really made us see the importance of life and death.
Yeah. And we don't talk a lot about, when you get a little bit older, I feel like there's a big challenge with coming from big families because as you have this big family, you would start to experience a lot of loss, unfortunately.
Mhm.
And so that is a challenge. But yeah, well, I'm excited to have you both here, and I'm really, really looking forward to get into this conversation. I think that people experience grief in different ways, and so I'm looking forward to providing some tools and techniques for people as we can continue the conversation. So, when we think about grief, we often think about losing a loved one, but grief has many layers. There's also grief in what we call when we have unmet expectations. And I wanted to talk about that on alternate path or transition. A lot of times people talk about, I thought I would be married by now. I thought I would be more
Mm,
successful. So you kind of grieve the life that you
yeah.
imagine yourself to have. I
Mhm.
thought I would have children by now. I may not ever be a mother.
Mhm.
So that disenfranchised grief, so to speak, to me is the one that people deal with more silently than anything.
That's good.
And
That's good.
Yeah.
Mm.
it shows up in how we date, where somebody might feel like, I feel like there's a timeline here or some pressure that I didn't know I was under, as your mate or whatever, because we operate from a space sometimes of disenfranchised grief. So before we get into that, I wanted to share a video created during the onset of the pandemic, which was about collective grief, which is what a lot of people experienced across the world as we went through the shutdown.
Yeah.
Okay, so when I talk to people right now since the pandemic, since COVID-19, and I say, "How are you doing?" and they describe how they're doing, I hear grief.
Yes.
But when I come back and say, "God, yeah, there's a lot of grief." No, 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 no. I'm not in grief. There's no grief here.
Right. Right.
Tell me about what you see us experiencing right.
Wow. What do you guys think about that particular video, thinking about the pandemic?
It for me, it touched on something that you had said just before the video played, and it's about grieving that life just looks different, right? It's not necessarily a death, but it's the fact that something looks different, and there's an awareness to that, and then there's got to be some acceptance, and then you have to move into rebuilding. But everybody goes at their own pace, it that affects everybody differently, and you've got to ride your wave and take it as it comes. But yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
watching the video, I thought about the beauty of resilience. This 6 years later, and just look how much we have learned, adjusted, adapted, moved on, holding what still happened, holding that it still exists, but holding also our continued evolution. I think it speaks to the resiliency of us and the beauty of the human race when we become one.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
carry one another burdens.
Yeah. I remember that period. One of the most difficult things about it was having to social distance alone, like being at home alone for days at a time with no human interaction. I think it was very difficult for a lot of people that were single, and a lot of people were getting extensive therapy because of it. And then you just kind of realize I remember when everything kind of opened back up, I was at that point, I was like, I kind of like being by myself. And, we actually, one of my friends and I joked about it. She said, when she went out without a mask for the first time, she was like, I caught everything but COVID. I caught the flu. I
Mhm.
caught this. I caught that because we had been protecting ourselves for so long. Our immune system had to
Mhm.
rebuild the strength to
Mhm.
endure some of the not just COVID, but some of the other, basic things. So I
Mhm.
think that one thing that was very powerful to me is when they said the world will not be the same after this. And I
Mhm.
didn't think I realized. I'm like, what is taking so long to find a cure? But later I went into 2021. I went into biotech, and that's what I truly understood, just from a scientific perspective, that there was going to be multiple variants. There was going to
Yeah,
be multiple
Yeah.
variants, and so that was not to me effectively explained in the beginning. So there was,
I
the
agree.
first variant was probably the most strong, and as over time different variants, they become weaker, but they also become resilient, because then
Mhm.
they'll come back and it'll mutate into something else. And we had one, I think, that was going around in 2023 that I felt was just as dangerous as the one in 2020, because it
Mhm.
had mutated into something that was attacking the immune system in a different way. And so I say that to say, I also think there was a lack of knowledge and
Yeah.
understanding of what was ahead of us.
Mhm.
And so, but to Renisha's point, we survived that. And that will go down in history books
Yeah.
along with this administration, but that's neither here nor there. So when we think about Lila, the kind of what I talked about with the disenfranchised grief, what we talked about with COVID, or grieving a life you once wanted or thought you would have. How do you, as a life coach, guide individuals through that particular type of grief when they're mourning the life they imagined? That's really what it is. You're mourning
Yeah.
the life that you imagine, whether it be relationships, career pathing, parenting journeys, or time loss. How do you help them rediscover their purpose?
I remind people that, again, that grief isn't just about what you lost, it's about what you thought your life would be. And I have a grief, I call it graceful grieving framework. And it just takes you through those steps of awareness, right? What is it that's bothering you? Um, Again, you need to accept it, right? You've got to acknowledge what it is, how life has changed, what your new vision is, and from there we go into rebuilding. Because you really need a new normal, right? We joke
Yeah,
sometimes and we call it like it's life after death, right? And so you really need a new normal. You need to be able to rebuild from where you are at that time. And then reframing is a big part of it, right? Because, instead of going, I thought I would have kids by now. What do you have? Right? Where is your life?
yeah,
Where are you going?
yeah.
Who's there for you? Who helps you? So I don't have children, but I've got nieces and nephews. And now I have a stepson, but I tell people, you know, no, I don't have biological children, but one of my greatest joys is being an aunt. Like you can't
Oh yeah, I'm a devoted aunt for sure.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And so
Mhm.
it's about reframing where you are and what you have. And from there, you
Yeah.
just, you have to help people find the meaning in it. You don't go back to who you were. You have to become who this new season requires you to be. And if that's the best aunt, or what do we call it, the fine rich auntie, whatever it is, that's yeah, and that's what we have to do. So that's how I work on helping people. You tell them you don't go backward, you only go forward.
Mhm.
Yeah, I love that. And I think to your point, you do have to focus on what you do have, and you got to reframe it, because things come in different ways. Like, we have a traditional thought process, but I think that there's different ways that you get blessed with the things that you want and the things that you
Mhm.
need, but
Yep.
you're so fixated on not having it the way you imagined it. And so you just have to, and but then you'll go back and be like, well, I also, like, for me, I also never thought I would have a podcast, right? Or I never thought I'd co-author a book. So there's other things that you forget that you have, that you didn't know was
Yep.
possible, because you could fixate on that. And
Mhm.
so, Renisha, I want to talk about some losses that carry what I call a unique and silent weight. So, for example, and I'm okay with talking about my personal example, but I had a miscarriage a couple years ago, and so the loss of a child is something that is unique because it's something that, a life that hadn't fully unfolded. How do you support clients in navigating such a deep and personal and complex grief? Like, so for me, I always was like, this world's too ghetto for my kid. I'll say something like that, or, I ain't want my baby here. No, no, I'm just playing. I didn't say that, but I would just say, like, that wasn't really the place for my child at this time. But it took
Mhm.
me
Mhm.
years to get to that
Mhm.
point.
Mhm.
Because I think for me specifically, I found out I was pregnant the same day I was losing a baby. So that's also
Mhm.
something very different. But it's
Mhm.
not something
Mhm.
I really talk about. Like, I would tell you, probably most people gonna find out I had a miscarriage from this episode, other than immediate family. But it does help. I usually share when I feel like it'll help other people. But I think a lot of women suffer in silence from those things. And so, Renisha, how do you help them with carrying what I call that silent grief?
First, I want to say thank you for your transparency and your courageousness, Miss Tony. And if you just give me a moment in this, because there's been so many people coming to my door as a clinician dealing with this. So the first thing I would do, if you're watching this episode and you've had a miscarriage or you're dealing with some of those silent losses, the first thing related to miscarriages itself, the first thing I do with my clients is really normalize this type of loss.
Mm-hmm.
Statistically, we used to look at some statistics. I don't think we really recognize all the factors and how common miscarriages are. About one in
Yeah.
five women who know they are pregnant will experience a miscarriage. You just said the same day I found out I was pregnant, I actually lost my kid, right? I
Yeah.
lost my fetus. And then that's another thing. I distance it and I like to say it's a fetus, right? Because here's the truth when
Yes.
we understand even like you talked about working at biotech, understanding science in it, when we really
Right.
understand that many very early losses are due to a chemical pregnancy. Some of them are due to chromosomal issues. And I don't think we
Mm,
talk about it enough, right? There's many
right.
issues that impact pregnancies. Um, I think that when we mourn the loss, oftentimes we are mourning imagination. Women are mourning the planning of the child, the feeling of the baby developing in her body, mourning the relationship plans. And going back to even something you said, like when you were talking about that level, even in imagination, what we thought on that we can do is move forward. I like to coach people. Sometimes your imagination will crush you. That's why I teach out of mind into life, because we have to get out of our
Mm,
minds.
Mhm.
Because if we get locked down by our minds, remember, that's only you, your perspective, your
Yeah.
experience. When you live in a
mm,
whole world, you got to get out of here in order for you to start
yeah.
enjoying the life that you're currently living. And that way, we're not competing with the Joneses. We're not comparing ourselves to everything else. Along with miscarriages, we also could be mourning where we plan the future with that kid, future planning,
Yes.
which can rob you of the beauty of the present, people.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Sometimes a miscarriage, and we also have to give it the right space. Miscarriages should not speak to an inadequacy within me.
Yeah.
Amen.
I
Yeah.
think sometimes when a woman have a miscarriage, it speaks to an inadequacy, and we connect that thing about her to something's wrong with her. She's inept. When it can literally be her immune system is so wonderful that it's fighting the fetus because the body sees children. Oftentimes, you can look it up. They see it as an intruder. It's like your body
Mm,
fighting off the flu. Like, it's like, what is this? And it really has to do a real implantation to get in there. That's why they say millions of sperm cells could try to get to that thing and only one made it. That's why it speaks to the importance of all of us who made it, how important you really are.
yeah.
Because in the midst of your development, there were thousands trying to get your position to come into life.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
When you really hear it like that. So I would say a greater conversation would be to accept some things. Um, an ideal that womanhood may not always include motherhood. And what
Mhm.
are mothers? You may not birth a child and still be a mother, and then be open to other opportunities. And also we don't recognize that sperm vitality impacts miscarriages as well.
Yeah.
You can have a low quality sperm, and that could be the reason why the woman lost the kid. Along with that, age. The older you get, the more you can have a miscarriage. If you drink, smoke, all those things can impact you too. So I just think it's important that we be more educated about it.
Yeah.
Um, and then I would say when I'm dealing with managing it, structure gives safety.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Trusting your life again,
Yeah.
trusting the world again.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's more to your point. It's more common than what we think, and so educating yourself is important. And I didn't experience like it never came to my mind to say, oh, I wasn't adequate and like that just didn't come to me. What
Yeah.
came to me was just more like what is going on, like because
Mhm.
I drink a lot of water, so when I was starting to experience the symptoms, I was like, I have not had enough water today. My body acting up, so I just attributed to like lack of H2O because I've never been pregnant before, so I didn't know. So I
Yeah.
actually had a delayed reaction where I realized a couple of days later what had happened, and that was very difficult too. So
Oh wow.
I think, but I didn't go through like anything as far as me thinking something was going on with my body. It was just more like, I wish I would have known what was going on because I didn't have any time where I even knew what was happening. So I think it differs. But I was at that point, I was educated on the statistics. A lot of people in their first trimester do lose their children for various reasons and have miscarriages in your first trimester. And so I was more, and my body healed itself. I didn't have to go to the hospital or anything like that. So that's
Wow.
another thing. Yeah, I didn't have any of that. So
Okay.
different people have different experiences. So thank you for that because I think that alone is going to heal a lot of people, and I say a lot of families because it's the mother and the father that has the loss, right? A lot of times we focus
Mhm.
on the woman, but it's both parties that have the loss. So I appreciate you sharing those statistics because I think that alone is going to heal a lot of people. So I want to go to what I call a club that no one really wants to be in, but it's a personal space where we hold space for people who have lost a parent, right? And I say that because when I lost my dad, I had to operate in a new normal because, and I listen, I was one of the people. Don't be telling me you lost your parent. You didn't lose my daddy, okay? You lost your parent. I lost my parent,
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
right? And so, I would love to hear from you both, starting with you, Laila. How does that show up? Because grief shows up with, I think, with the loss of a parent, specifically in your day to day functionality. So, how do you help people have compassion along the way with themselves with the loss of a parent?
I didn't realize it until probably 2 years after both of my parents had passed away, and within 10 months of each other. Losing a
Mm-hmm.
parent doesn't just change your life, it changes your identity. It
There you go.
changes, yeah, it changes who you are. And when you lose a parent, it's like losing a version of yourself.
Yeah.
Where do I go for this safety? Where do I go for this backup? I only have me to depend on now. And what does that look like for me?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that loss was
Yeah. Nobody's
probably
baby
the
girl anymore.
no, I am look, I am the go-to person. Yeah. And for me,
Mm-hmm.
the loss of my parents was one of the most defining moments in my life because I had to decide, do I let this break me or do I build? And I was looking around. My mother's mother was still alive. I've got
Mm-hmm.
siblings, nieces, nephews, and I made a decision. Like, you have to make a conscious choice. So I made a decision to see grief differently. And I call my parents my angel squad. We got Mama Sita, and we got the big dog up in heaven, and they didn't leave me. So I help people understand that the people, your loved ones don't leave you. They're just repositioned in your life. Um,
I like.
I, s- yeah, they're just
Mhm.
repositioned. I look out the window, a blessing here at the house, and there's the Cardinals and the Blue Jays come, and they come in there, and I'm like, hey mama, hey daddy. When those birds come by, I know my parents came to visit. I step out my back door, they're sitting on the gate. So I help people understand that you've just got to see it differently. And that perspective allowed me to move through life with a different strength, a different purpose. And it's a sense of being covered. I used to also say, like, when the wind blew, that I knew that that was one of my parents kissing me on the cheek.
Oh,
So
I love that.
Yeah, so the grief still shows up. And I just learned to live alongside it and not fight it. I remember sitting at my desk one day and somebody said something and it reminded me like, oh, my dad would have did this. And I cried and they like, you need to go. I don't, just let me have my moment, let it pass, and we'll keep going. So yeah, it just grief doesn't go away. You have to learn how to carry it differently. And that's what I work with people. And that's how I work with people on moving through it.
I love that. Renisha,
I think
what do you think from your perspective?
I love what you were saying.
Hmm.
Um, what I would add is adding protective factors. I think it's so important that we normalize loss, just like we normalize birth. Birth is one aspect of life and death is another. I think so often that we look at death as it's the enemy or it betrays life instead of it is a part of the life cycle. We are appointed once to live and then we shall die. Everything in life has a cycle. What goes up must come down. I think the importance of us understanding life, understanding the cycle, we'll begin to prepare for death differently and live with more intentionality.
Yeah,
I
I
love
love
that.
that. Yeah, I agree. I think that you can get overly involved in something that you miss what's happening in front of you. You miss the presence. I think most of the therapy that I've experienced is learning how to live in the moment and live in the present and not overthink about the future or really be so broken up about the past. So Renisha, I remember you said to me a couple years ago, and I think it was when I was going through the death of my father, you said grief needs to be honored and respected. And I never forgot that because I felt like you were just reminding me to hold space. But I wanted to give you an opportunity to expand on what that truly means and how we can think about that as we begin to practice our own healing.
Oh, I think grief is sacred. It is the place, just like, if I've been able to be blessed to be able to be in a room with multiple people passing. And right after they pass, I've been able to be a part of that journey. No different than I've been able to be in a room when children are born. If I be honest with you, it's so similar. When you watch the
Mm.
child coming in, there's this crowning moment where life changes because
Mm,
this baby has come into the room and now everything is different. Well, when death happens, that person has left the room and now everything is different. When children come into the world, it comes from a foreign place that we don't know about. We just experience that baby is here. And when somebody leave us, the truth is, we can have theories, but we don't know nothing. We
mm,
just know they're gone from us physically. So I believe that it's a sacred place that needs to be honored and respected from a spiritual place and a limitness of our understanding. I
Yeah.
think it's a beautiful
yeah.
space that if we begin to embrace it more, we can reverence it more. Respect your tears, respect that
Yeah.
the life cycle, we are all connected to one another. And, when you're still here, and I love the beauty of blood passing when somebody shares the same DNA, when a mother
Hmm.
passed, when a father passed, because that's the beauty of the stamping of identity. When my father passed, I still see him every day. Michael.
You do?
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You know,
She said, "You do?"
I think
I'm
so.
like,
I look like my dad more than my mom. Growing up,
Mhm.
nobody thought my mom was my mom. But when I got with my daddy, everybody said I look like my daddy. I go with my father's family, I look like my father's family. Even more so than my mother's family. It'll freak you out. So
Yeah.
like, so it's just that grieving space will be, I wish that people will really honor it. And then um I also, when I'm teaching grief cycle, I come out of different grief cycles. I teach about the different stages of mourning. I like to educate people about the change cycle. If you guys are listening, www.changecycle.com, It was meant for management trainings when people go through big changes, but I use it alongside with grief work because it prepares you for the different stages you will go into your life when a big change happen. So like the first stage is loss of safety. So we teach structure, give safety. Get back into knowing, where your food come from, where you're going, where you're sleeping. Get into protective factors. Who's your person, as you spoke about earlier, Laila? Who's your person that comforts you? What's next? Who's your support system? Having your grounding tools, having ways to take time to grieve, and respecting the mourning process. If not your enemy, it's your friend, and it is evidence that you belong and you still have life.
Yeah. Yeah, well, this is some really good conversation, and I think it's going to heal people, one moment at a time, because I think sometimes grief is like taking a chunk out of an elephant and you cannot take it on all at once. And so, before we get into a commercial break, I do want to touch on something really quickly that's important for me to speak to, specifically Black women. Black women are 3 times more likely to die at childbirth. And I think it's very important that I talk about that,
Mhm,
because when I had my miscarriage, my first doctor, my primary care, I actually changed because of it. Tried to convince me I didn't have a miscarriage. And so I went for a while thinking I didn't have one, that it was just fibroids, which is common with Black women. And then I went to a gynecologist who was a Black woman, and she said, "Hey, don't ever let somebody tell you what's going on with your body. Everything that you told me happened ain't never happened before. You had a miscarriage." And so again, I just want to touch on Black women specifically being confident enough to get a second opinion,
mhm,
advocating for yourself.
Yeah.
mhm,
Not If you have pain, if you don't feel like something's right, you have to do something. We are not listened to the way we should be, and that fatality rate for Black women in childbirth is alarming. And we need to
mhm,
continue to just bring awareness to that. And that's just the clinical biotech in me that I want to make sure I talk about that. We could go, I don't want to go down this path, but Black and brown people are 3 times more likely to have fatality with most infectious
Yeah.
diseases, a
mhm,
lot of different things because of obesity, hypertension, and our underlying health conditions. So we really have to pay attention to our bodies. So, as we get into our commercial break, because we have to pay the bills, I want to give a special shout out to our sponsor, Potty Products. If you would like to take this transformation journey with the DGT team, you are absolutely welcome to do that. And you can do ads, you can do publicity, you can do promos with Detroit Girl Transform. Just contact me at DGT313 podcast@gmail.com. And now over to our sponsors from Potty Products. Welcome back to another episode of Detroit Girl Transform. I am your host, Tony Carter. I'm joined by some amazing and powerful guests, Renisha and Laila, who have been taking us on this healing journey of healing and restoration as we talk about from grief to grace. Really, really feel that this conversation was necessary. I'm excited to have this as a part of our well-being series because I think it's not talked about enough, and I think a lot of people experience it with a bit of suffering and silence. So we are going to spend the rest of this conversation today talking about how do we nurture and heal and really go in that journey from grief to grace. So, Laila, I want to talk about what are some grounding wellness practices or activities you recommend for those navigating grief? What does restoration truly look like in action for you, and what do you tell some of your clients?
So the first thing I tell them is that restoration isn't a moment; it's a practice,
mm,
right? And so The focus, the grounding practices, the things that you can bring back to yourself. So you can journal. In my view, if you can't heal what you don't get out, so you need to journal. There's prayer, there's stillness, and there's learning how to set boundaries, because that's a huge one as you move through into this new normal. So restoration is less about doing more and more about becoming intentional. You've got to protect your peace. You've got to create spaces for you to heal, and you've got to create space for you to process what it is that you're going through. So it's very simple, but it's powerful. People never really think, oh, journaling and writing. It's that art and that act of that pen and that paper and your hand sliding across that paper as you let out the things that you've been holding on. Um, so healing is quiet, but the results for me, I say the results are very loud. So
I love that. Renisha, how about you? Anything that you would add to that?
I want to go on. I think defining spirituality is important. I think if what we consider death to be is important and
mhm,
how we look at it. If I be honest, the most thing I feel I deal with my clientele is people are afraid of dying. They're afraid of death. They don't understand the
mhm,
process. They're afraid what they don't know. So to me, the importance of having spirituality, having a conscious ideal of what you think the death chamber is, and
mhm,
oneness with it, I think this gives comfort because it gives connection, it gives information, it gives hope, it give your faith, it give it a standard, and it helps promote acceptance. And acceptance is the golden key.
Yeah.
Accepting what you cannot control. We think we got more control over what we call life than we really do.
yeah,
Um, and I
I
feel
call
like
it
it's
radical acceptance.
yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
yeah,
Radically. Meaning you gotta have a level of excitability and craziness in it. Some stuff you're not gonna know. You got to do it radically.
Hmm.
yeah,
And I also think if you don't know where you're going, any road will lead you there. It's the same way to me with restoring yourself. You got to know where you're
Yeah.
going. You got to know your plan.
Yeah.
You, you
yeah.
know, and protective factors I think is major. Um, and plans, having life plans.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I totally agree. I think that you have to kind of figure out where you want to go with it. And I think having a life plan in general, even if the plan gets altered, right?
Yeah.
You can always evolve it, right? I consider my life kind of a portrait, right? I pick the colors, I pick the paint, but I can't always tell you where the brush is going. So,
Yeah.
but I can tell you it's going to end up beautiful. It's going to be whatever God has designed it to be. So, so one of the things I wanted to talk about is it's important, and I don't think we talk about this enough. Grief doesn't just affect me or you as the individual; it has an impact on the people around us. So,
Hmm.
we have whether it be our friends, our partner, our significant other, our loved ones, our family. How can those individuals that are significantly close to us show up with love and understanding during this time of grief for us as an individual? So if I have a friend or a wife or a spouse that's grieving, how can I show up for them with love and compassion during that time? What do you recommend as far as how I show up for someone that's grieving?
I like when people are normal. I like it when your presence. My friends would just come and sit with me, right? We didn't have to talk about anything. We didn't have to have a plan, but they would just show up. And I think the best thing that people can do for you is to just show up. Um, and hold space, right? So because I'm not always crying, but I'm not always happy, and I'm not always joking. So just hold space for wherever I am in that moment, and get on this roller coaster with me and just go for the ride. Because grief isn't something that you solve, right? It's something that you walk through. And partnership, Renisha spoke earlier about partnership. Partnership is so important in this journey. You want somebody to come and sit down with you and just be there with you. So I think that's one of the most important ways that people can show up for you.
Okay.
And I would
Renee.
jump in and add to that. I'm going to just add with you. When I talk about protective factors and stakeholders, oftentimes support also look like money, honey. It looks like helping pay the bills. It looked
Mhm.
like giving some time. It looked like bringing some meals. It looked like allowing safe places to sleep and rest and to cry and vent. It allows people to let me not be normal because I'm not normal. I did
Yeah.
everything about my life is not
Mhm.
normal. So it's let me freak out. Let me, change the standards for me so
Yeah.
I can just be a
Yeah.
person. I can be a human being and not a human doing. I think support is important when you're dealing with a mother whose husband get killed in a car accident and he was the main provider of the family.
Yeah.
You can help bury this man and sit with her and support her, but she needs a job. She needs somebody to help pay these bills. She's gonna need some support. She don't know how to call AAA. I'll never
Yeah.
forget. If I may share a quick story, I never forget the day my father was the one who always had me under his AAA account. So anytime I had an issue with my car, I would call my daddy. And I'll never forget the day my car got a flat while I was on 75 freeway. My father had died earlier that year. What I did unconsciously was called my daddy. I had a
Mhm.
straight panic attack on the freeway.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
I pulled over and called my daddy, and that phone was like, dear, dear, dear. Oh my gosh.
Mm.
It was like my daddy died all over again. I never forget it.
Yeah.
And I had to calm myself down. And then I called my big brother. Like, my car, daddy dead. He was like,
Mm.
what? He was like, girl, if you don't take your tail to the car dealership on da da da, where you at? Go straight there. And I'll
Yeah.
never
Yeah. It,
forget
it
it.
can be. Yeah.
Yeah.
It could
I'll
be the
never
least
forget it.
little thing.
Like,
It is that, but that's why I said it's a new normal because you will have a
Yeah.
moment like everybody know how often I went to Florida to see my dad.
Yeah.
So my family
come
had to
on.
remind me, like, hey, we still down here because when he passed away, I just threw the whole state away. I said, you know what? I'm not going down there. My daddy not here no more. I don't want to see the house. I still have not.
Right.
I have not been inside my father's house since the day he died. I can't do it.
Wow.
Now I know
Mhm.
my other siblings was going there. I don't care what the furniture looked like. They might have remodeled. I got stuff in there. I'm sure. I ain't going in there. So everybody
Yeah.
have their thing. I did want to talk about really quickly, and this is just me speaking about my triggers and what not to do with me. Okay, don't call me asking me all the details of how a person died. And we as a culture have a really bad habit. Well, what happened? What, baby, how many times have you think I've told that story a day? I threatened to put my voice on a recorder. I'm not kidding y'all. And just hit play every time somebody called me when my daddy died. I did not, I don't know why we are so obsessed with details. And I tell people, do not call me to collect information when I'm grieving. You either here to support or you not. So don't do that. I don't like when people keep saying, what do you need? What do you need? Now I can't think, but now I gotta think about what to tell you to give me. I don't know what I need. I'm drowning. I can't even remember my name right now. You ain't never had nobody. What do people need when people die? They got funerals.
Yep.
They got all this
Yeah.
stuff. So use your
Mhm.
critical thinking skills. Don't make me think for you. And that's what I'm going through any kind of grief. Do not
Yeah.
keep calling my phone talking about what do you need. And then be like, well, you said you didn't need nothing. I said, leave me alone
Yeah.
because people that really know me will have an idea of and I'm not saying you got to guess or think, but sometimes, and this is just me, I feel like people that constantly say, what do you need? It's almost like getting themselves off the hook. Like, well, I asked them, I
Yeah.
tried to, it's not really, again, I'm not here to comfort you. And now I got to think about so I tell people, tell me what you had a capacity to do because I don't know your capacity. I might say I need a cruise on a yacht. Can you do it? No. So you
Hey,
tell me, like,
amen.
when I'm supporting somebody, I call them with, hey, here's the things I'm good at. Lolly would tell you, I was her personal assistant.
Baby. Yep. I just was thinking about that. Listen, my cousin said, don't answer the phone. I'll check the voicemail. And at the end of every day, she sent me a summary. I called them back. This what they needed. Don't worry about it. Yeah, she was my personal assistant. And that's what you need. People to show up. Cause
People
that was
who
my
do it.
saving
Like,
grace.
I didn't call
Yeah.
Lolly every day. What do you need? Or like when my grandmother died, the way people fell out in the line, and every time it was, oh, Robbie, go. I said, now who else gonna fall out in this grass on Wyoming? Get yourself up. What are you doing? We done just calmed
Mhm.
ourselves down. We done had a good laugh about grandma. Somebody come over 6 days later, falling out in the line. Please fall out at home. We already dealing with what we dealing with. So it's just like, so I'm just saying for me, because I'm not an expert. This is not coming from us. This is me as a person who has experienced grief. I'm just telling you the things don't do with me. Don't ask me every little detail about how they passed away, because all we need to know is they no longer here. Okay? Don't come over here falling out on the porch, and don't constantly, do not burden me with the question of what do you need. So that's just my little trigger. All right. So we're gonna get into our last question. Um, well, I want to do two more questions. One is I want to gently open the door to a personal space of just kind of what does it look like, you know, what sometimes for me I found healing in new environments like traveling, exploring. What are some thoughts on the roles of changing the season? How do you guys feel about changing the scenery in the process of grieving? That don't mean you got to spend a lot of money going out of the country, but what does that look like? What are your thoughts on changing the scenery when you're grieving? Risha, what do you think about that?
Well, I would say this, changing the scenery as in to get out, to refresh yourself is one thing, but changing your life is detrimental for your mental health. We will tell you
Mm,
that when you're going through, because when you lose somebody, that is such a big life change, and it's going to impale different areas of your life. So we actually tell you structure give you safety, and to keep as many things the same as you can. When someone is going through, because we got to remember, grief is a part of a trauma depending upon the relationship you had. And when trauma
mm,
happens, you don't keep inciting the trauma. You wanna
Mhm.
you
yeah,
wanna get that person stable. You wanna get so this I've seen people lose a parent and now they wanna get a new job. They change their hair. They break up in a relationship. They
definitely
wanna move
changing it.
across the country. Move
Yeah.
across the country as
Yeah.
if their hair is gonna change a life. You know, that's cosmetic, that's simple. But the truth, and then when they get to another part of the country, they break down. Why? Because you was avoiding the real issue. You need to address
Yeah,
the issue. Exposure therapy teaches us keep exposing yourself to it. You know, the moment I kept not trying to deal with my father's ashes compared to finally holding them, I finally held him. I held my
Mhm.
grief and I changed.
mhm,
When I kept ignoring it, it kept becoming that big quote unquote elephant
big
in the room and
elephant in
it
the
just
room. Yeah,
engrossed itself.
Wow.
yeah.
Yeah.
Lolly,
So
what do you think
limit your
about that?
changes.
Limit the
You
changes.
know,
You're saying, yeah.
Hmm.
Renisha is so right. From hands on, my mama passed away, and I said, "Let me remodel this house." And I went to change the curtains, and I fell out. My daddy was looking at me. He said, "What is going on?" I said, "Well, if Mama was here, she would be able to redecorate." And when it was too much too fast, right? She wasn't here. I
Yeah,
was driving her car, and I am the spitting image of my mother. Like
yes,
there's
you are.
no. So it
You are
was
Deborah Williams. Yes, ma'am.
crazy. Yes,
Mm-hmm.
I am little Debbie. That's what
Little
your
Debbie.
mama called me. Um, so the things around you, I think it's safe to hold on, to a few things and see how life plays out, see how you smooth out to it. And then new environments create new energy and new perspective, and you get to breathe differently. But for me, that's go for a walk. Try that grounding
Mm-hmm.
practices where you go outside without your shoes on. Sit on the
Now,
back porch and let the sun kiss your face. Okay, in the grass at your house
okay,
without
because
your shoes on, cause
okay,
I know,
girl,
I know.
you know I'm
Yeah.
Tawana's child. We gonna be outside with no shoes on. But
I
yes,
know.
I
Yeah.
I've been working on being present and meditating in the shower because you'd be surprised at how you in the shower thinking about all the other things you got to do.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm like,
Mhm.
just be present. Like, oh, this is such a nice, relaxing soap, like, because I'm not a person like, people that meditate for hours. Go ahead. I'm trying to get 10 minutes down.
Yeah. Yeah. The
Yeah.
shower was my place to cry. That's where I went to get it all out. That was my place
Uh,
to cry. Yep.
Mhm.
yeah. Yeah. And also
Mhm.
give yourself grace. Like, I was the person that changed too much. When my grandmother died, I moved to Charlotte. They moved back. I've been in Charlotte, Chicago, DC. I just was like, when my grandmother died, she died in like the summer. I was relocated with a new job that February. It shocked so many people.
Yeah.
But I was like, I wanted to live out of state, but I didn't want to leave my granny because she was a little bit older. So once she passed away, I was like, okay, I'm going to my next chapter. That was,
Mhm.
that's how I always remember when I first moved away from home. So I'm gonna give myself grace. That probably wasn't the right thing to do, Renisha, but it was the right thing at that time. Well,
Well, because we could go there. Because think about what happened after that. You went through a big issue. It caught you up too. So life does that. So, but I would just speak that to people because that's what happens. And it's like, but you also said something powerful, Tony. You said I was only staying here because she was ill. So
Mhm.
that
yeah.
speaks to how much we alter our lives and our
Yeah.
destiny for others. So what
Oh
I
yeah.
would really coach someone is don't allow one person to stop you from living.
Mm.
Both
Yeah,
can
I
agree,
only stayed in, yeah, because my parents were very independent, so they didn't, my dad was in Florida, my mom was in Michigan, but so I was there looking after Granny, with the family. So when she
Yep.
passed
Mhm.
away, I was like, well, it's Detroit.
You like I'm
See you
deuces.
later,
You like
Yep.
alligator.
And I'm out. And I'm out.
Yeah. Well, last question. I think we talked about it a little bit earlier, but the work that you all do is so sacred, right? It definitely helps people with vulnerability and their most valuable and most impactful moments of what path they're going to go in the future. Um, what impact have you made that you're most proud of? And you don't have to go into a specific individual or client, but just like, I think that the work that you do is a stamp in your legacy and your contribution to the world, fulfilling your purpose. Is there anything that you said, hey, I'm the most proud of making the mark with this? And I'll start with you, Renisha.
mm. Tony, if I be honest, that's such a hard question to ask and isolate to one thing. So
Mm-hmm.
my answer would be I would say the one thing that I'm most proud of is opening my own clinic
Mm-hmm.
because I get to do it my way.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
I've been able to be a part of hundreds of life changing and get to watch them all grow. It's hard to really quantify for real or isolate that because
I
you
mean,
see
being an
the child that
entrepreneur.
learns to live after their mother died after cancer, and you get to watch them grow. You get to see somebody live a different life, move somewhere, dare to be different, change their life. It's just so rewarding. So I would say what I'm most proud of is being able to continue the work and not be burnt out.
Yeah.
Amen. I
Life,
love
would you
that.
agree?
I agree. I love watching people remember who they are. I think that is
I love that.
whatever it is we got going on. When you remember who you are and that clicks, I exhale. I'm like, my work here is done. We can continue some maintenance, but my work here is done. You are no longer you realizing that you aren't broken, that you're becoming whoever you are in this next stage of your life. So that's it for me.
Yeah, and I think about, I just saw the Michael Jackson movie, and I'm obsessed with him all over again. But I think about the people who nurture his ability to really branch out on his own, and think about the fact that there are people that can look back and say that I had an impact on, nurturing and letting out, exposing the world to one of the, if not the greatest entertainer of all time.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
By giving that, whether it be giving the affirmation, recording the first album with him,
Yeah.
but really just letting him be free to do what he wanted to do.
It's nothing like watching somebody come into their identity. It's nothing
Mm-hmm.
like, we call it that light bulb moment. When the
Yep.
light bulb come on with somebody, when they get it. Because when somebody get it, they got themselves and they can go get their life. So
Mm-hmm.
just being able to be a change agent to see people get it.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. Well, ladies, our time has come to an end. Thank you for healing so many people today. I think
Mm,
talking about this conversation of grief is really necessary and it's important. But I think what I'm getting from this conversation is less about the grief, but more about the purpose and stepping in your
mm.
purpose and your passion
Yeah.
and really living your life, continuing to live your life and living out loud. So thank you so much. And for all of our guests, if you have comments, like, comment, share. Make sure you subscribe to Detroit Girl Transformed on the Resilient Radio stream. We're on every single Tuesday, Transformation Tuesday, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. As you know, I am all about well being, and tonight was no different than us continuing to pour
Yeah.
into our hearts and our souls. See you all next Tuesday. Thank you all so much. Thank you to Laila and Renisha again for really
Thank you.
Thank
blessing
you,
us
Miss
with some
Tony.
gems tonight. And we'll talk to you soon. Bye, everybody.
Thanks for having
Bye.
us. Bye.
Thank you so much for having me.